So I mentioned a week ago that I was going to do one of my drive talks, and I still haven't gotten to it. So I thought it probably is about time. Now, for those of you who are new to my channel and have not come across these before, these are basically more informal videos. I prefer not to do live streams because I have ADHD, so I get distracted really easily. So when I'm doing live streams, I kind of get lost partway through and forget what I'm talking about because I'm reading everyone's comments. So I prefer to do, if I'm doing something a bit more freeform, I prefer to pre-record it and then release it. So with these, there's never really one single topic that I'm covering. I will just go from one thing to another, basically just what's on my mind. Now, you're probably familiar by now with my co-host, and she is sound asleep and starting to snore, so you'll probably hear plenty from her. Now, in this video, I want to discuss a number of different cases and my thoughts on those cases. I want to briefly introduce a case that I am wanting to get to in the near future. It seems like lately I've just been so busy with working on stuff for the Madeline Soto case, so absorbed in the Delphi case, that other things have gone by the wayside. So there is a new case that I'm going to be covering, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the beginning. I also want to, of course, talk a bit more about Maddie's case, Maddie Soto, a little bit about Delphi, a little bit about Kylie Rodney, and also a little bit about Kristen Smart. So I'm actually going to cover quite a few things during this video. Like I said, it's kind of freeform, so I'm just going to speak and let it come out how it comes out. So first of all, in terms of Kristen Smart. So just to give people a bit of a background, Kristen Smart was a college student who went missing in 1996, I think it was. It was kind of mid to late 90s. Her remains have yet to be found, but a bit over 2 years ago, there was finally a trial for the man who was convicted for her death, Paul Flores. And basically what came out in the trial was that Kristen had been to a off-campus party the night that she went missing. She'd been with a few other people. She was a little bit drunk, more than a little bit drunk. And she was walking home with 3 people, a female college student, another male college student, and Paul Flores. And the female college student that was with her actually testified at court that she didn't feel comfortable around Paul Flores. And she was actually going to stick with Kristen the whole way. But eventually, Paul Flores convinced her, after the other student had gone off to his dorms, eventually Paul Flores convinced her that it would be okay and he would get Kristen back to her own dorm. So this other student went off on her way back to her dorms, and that was the last that Kristen was seen, heading off back towards her dorm with Paul Flores. Paul Flores claimed that he got her as far as the dorms and watched her walk back up the hill to her dorm, and then he went back to his own dorm room and knows nothing more. Of course, the problem there is that Kristen was apparently so drunk, there's no way that she could have made it back to her own dorm room on her own. And there was a lot of evidence against Paul Flores in trial, including dogs alerting to his room at the college. Multiple dogs, not just one. It appears that Kristen's remains were buried under Paul's father's deck for a couple of decades and were only moved around the time that Paul Flores was arrested. His father was actually on trial also for his involvement in that. The jury actually acquitted him, which was quite a surprise because I think most people who were following the trial believed that he would have would have been convicted, sorry. So Paul Flores has been calling his heels for the last 2 years. There's already been a few attempts on his life in prison. Meanwhile, he's still refusing to give up the location of Kristen's remains, and the latest news as of August is that there are plans for an appeal. So I will do a video about that probably later in the week, time permitting, where I will discuss that a little bit further. Now, moving on to a new case that I want to cover in the near future, and that is the case of Madalena Kojikari. This is a little girl who was 11, and she was last seen on CCTV footage getting off her school bus. Now, I think it was about 5 or 6 weeks later. I haven't got my notes in front of me, but there was a considerable gap in time before the school called the mother in for a meeting because Madalena had not been attending school. And the mother reported to the school that her daughter was missing. She didn't know where she was. So she had essentially been missing for something like 2 months before she was actually reported missing. Now, both parents were convicted for offences relating to not reporting that she was missing. So at this point in time, there have been no arrests relating to her actual disappearance, but her parents were convicted for offences for basically not reporting their child missing. Both of them did time. I think they're both out from memory. I haven't looked at my notes in a while, sorry. And then within the last so many months, it was announced that they were looking at the mother as a suspect in her daughter's disappearance. So guess what? The mother's free. They've announced that she's a suspect. She's now skipped the country. So this is a really interesting case that I do want to dig into more, and I will certainly, should time permit, be hoping to get into it in the next couple of weeks. So there are two cases that I haven't talked about much. Well, I haven't spoken about Madalena's case at all, but I have done some coverage of Kristen's case. If you've been with my channel for a while, you'll know that I've followed Kristen's case since the 90s. I was a few years out of college myself at the time, so it just really struck home for me when I heard about this college student that had gone missing. So let's move on. And before I move on to Maddie, I'm going to just, I'll put this out here now so the trolls can have a listen, they can fill their boots, and then they can go off on their merry way, and they don't have to listen to the rest of my video. I want to talk about the Delphi case. So I find it really disappointing that there are some rather nasty things happening right now in terms of the Delphi case. The main thing, of course, being people making accusations against Kelsey. Of course, the amusing thing is that some of these people know so very little about the case that they don't even know Kelsey's name. And I saw someone on somebody's post, on someone's video, making this big, long spiel about how they thought it had to have been the sister Carly. I'm like, well, clearly you know very little about this case if you don't even know her name. And I think, anyone with a quarter of a brain cell will know that the fact that one of Kelsey's hairs was found in one of the girl's hands is a no-brainer. Before they even left the house, Libby was pestering Kelsey in the bathroom while Kelsey was getting ready to go out. Kelsey was probably brushing her hair, meaning that Libby probably got a hair on her t-shirt even. And then when they went to the bridge, both Becky and Kelsey had insisted the girls wear jumpers. So at some point in time, Kelsey put a jumper on. Either the hair was caught up in the jumper or the hair, like I said, was on the t-shirt from her being in the bathroom with Kelsey. Or the hair was in the jumper that Kelsey loaned Abby. It's not something that came from the crime scene. You can't honestly tell me that a 17-year-old girl who idolised her younger sister would have done something like this. It's a joke, and it is the worst kind of victimisation ever. Now, as for all the hoo-ha about people still going on that Richard Allen is innocent, and people actually talking about writing letters to Richard Allen to show their support. Well, here's the thing. When that order is lifted on the 20th of December and suddenly information starts coming out, there's going to be a lot of people who suddenly start to realise that they've been played. The defence team from day one started manipulating media and started manipulating social media, mainstream media and social media, to manipulate people's opinions. Now, the crazy thing is, this is something that used to occur before we had social media, where the media themselves were pressuring public opinion. And yet people became aware of this and a bit more resistant to it. Yet, what have we done? We've come full circle. People seem to have not noticed that they have been grossly manipulated by the defence team. We're talking about them using YouTube creators to push a narrative. I've heard from a few sources that people were approached in the lead up to this trial by people representing the defence side, basically, and were asked to report for the defence. And we've seen some people who are apparently defence lawyers coming out on YouTube and doing their trial coverage that has been very heavily biased towards the defence team. Unfortunately, you've had some really influential creators following those people for their own content. And so what has happened is that you've had this massive wave of people being fed biased information from the trial. And I can say that unequivocally. At the beginning of the trial, was actually watching a few content creators, watching a few people who'd been at the trial, because I didn't want to miss out on any information. So I was spending a lot of time listening to different people recapping what they'd heard in the court. However, two of the channels that I was listening to, it very quickly became apparent that they were leaving out chunks of information. They were leaving out information that had come out during the trial that did not shine well for the defence's case. I think one creator, the final straw with me was she was explaining a bunch of things to do with evidence, and then she said something along the lines of there was other stuff said or there was other stuff shown, but it's not really important, it's not really relevant, so I'm not going to waste your time going over it. The thing is, the other stuff that was shown or the other stuff that was said actually pretty much destroyed the defence's argument for that particular witness or evidence or whatever it was. I can't remember. I just remember that I went, wow, that's really biased, and I actually clicked off her content straight away and went, I'm not going back there. That was not the first time she had shown a really obvious bias. I've also heard reports of notes being passed between the defence team and YouTubers in the courtroom. And of course you have the YouTuber who referred to Andy for one of the lawyers and all the rest as Mr. this, Ms. that, or whatever, which made you think that they were definitely connected. Now, I'd be curious to know if money has changed hands to encourage certain creators to sway public opinion for the defence. It's certainly something that we would never find out. Or whether it is just, well, hey, we'll make sure that you can get into the courtroom every day, and that's going to guarantee that you get lots of views for your content. You're going to make a bucket load of money out of this anyway. Stick with us, you're going to get rich. Now, thankfully, one of the extremely large, extremely influential content creators who wasn't at the trial, but based all her reporting on one of the particularly biased defence lawyers, she has a kind of channel where she moves from one case to the next pretty rapidly. So thankfully she's not decided to linger on Delphi. She's spoken about the verdict and then she's put it aside, because I think if she were to continue to push this narrative that some people are pushing, that Richard Allen is innocent, the verdict was wrong, yada, 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 that there could be some really, really nasty stuff start happening. Not that there isn't already. I know firsthand that people who were in Delphi and were reporting less biased information had threats made against them. So there's a lot of nastiness coming out. Of course, the big question everyone is asking is, will there be an appeal? Well, I think we can be pretty confident that there will definitely be an attempt at an appeal. They will certainly attempt to begin the process. But here's the thing. He basically confessed over 60 times. You know how many times cases go to appeal when someone has confessed? Never. Now, I know people are like, well, he was going through psychosis when he confessed. That actually isn't quite right. He began confessing before this psychosis began. And the timeline of when he began confessing? Around March and April. When were the girls killed? 13th of April. He began confessing in the lead up to the anniversary of the girls' deaths. He made his confession to his wife and his mother before any signs of psychosis appeared. It was only after that occurred and his wife and his mother both rejected his attempts to admit guilt that he suddenly went downhill. Why is that? We've been told by people from both sides in the courtroom that he had what was known as a dependent personality disorder, meaning that he was reliant on other people for approval. He desperately needed approval from his wife and from his mother. And when he confessed to them and they said, stop, don't say that, you didn't do it, should he have been trying to get them to accept what he was saying, to accept him? Should he have been, as he was diagnosed, desperate for approval, and he wasn't telling the truth, he would have stopped. But he was adamant that he wanted to confess to them. He continued to tell them, no, I did it. That's the sign of someone who is telling the truth. When did the psychosis begin? After his wife contacted the lawyers and he received all the discovery material, and clearly his lawyers at some point said, you got to stop doing this. You can't confess. This is a guy who wanted to unburden himself, and all the people around him that mattered didn't want to support him. Instead, they told him, you have to stay quiet, you can't say this. That's what prompted his spiral into a psychosis, if it was a real psychosis. I suspect that it may well have been a real psychosis, and I suspect that it was because of the rejection from his wife and his mother, not because of false confessions. They were not false confessions. Now, I did do one video where I spoke about facts relating to the Delphi case. I only had 100 views on it, but I think I might still do some more of these videos, because even if at this point in time they're not getting the views, maybe even if I can help a few people understand the difference between facts and fiction, and to see things logically, maybe that may help the families of these beautiful girls who right now must be feeling horrible. The trial's over. It's not a time to celebrate. The girls aren't coming back. But after all the anxiety around the trial, to have all this circus over people who are in love with Richard Allen, that can't be nice for them. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Delphi for today, because I know there's a lot of people that probably just don't want to hear it. But it is something I'm so passionate about. I heard about the case really, really early days, and I did follow it very closely until Richard Allen's arrest. And then I basically kept up with articles. I didn't follow it online on YouTube because there was just so much misinformation coming out. And people were spouting things that they'd been told without actually stopping to use a bit of critical thinking about the information that had been put out. And I think that's something that's been severely lacking in the last 2 years, the ability to think critically and logically. And I think that's why there is suddenly so much hatred happening right now. Anyway, I did say that I was going to stop talking about Delphi, and I've continued, but it's time to move on to other things. So, because I'm probably going to yabber more about the Maddie Soto case than anything else, I'll move on to Kylie Rodney now. So, if you've followed my channel for a while, you're probably familiar with the fact that I started my channel because of the Kylie Rodney case. I didn't start around the time that Kylie went missing. I know a lot of people did. But for me, I was one of these people who, in the background, was emailing multiple creators with information, with thoughts, with things that I'd noticed. And I did that for a number of months until around the time when Squirrel Girl exited the scene. Things had become kind of nasty with this YouTuber who had popped up and was using other people's content and claiming that it had been given to him by a private detective, even though those of us who were really following the case had already seen the content on other people's channels, and we knew that it wasn't from a private detective. But people like that always seem to get a following of twits who don't use their brains and just believe what they're being told. And there was some nastiness going on because originally when he popped up, people thought he was going to be an okay channel. Squirrel Girl had given him some support. And then he had basically turned around, bitten the hand that fed him, basically. And she became very upset over what was going on, and she left YouTube. She'd been one of my main contacts up until that point in time, and I'd shared a lot of theories with her. I'd shared a lot of discoveries with her. There'd been other channels that I'd been communicating with who had moved away from Kylie's case by that stage, and the other channel that I was communicating with was Squirrels on Fire. So at that point in time, I was already in Squirrels in Fire's Discord, her public Discord, and just there was some encouragement within that Discord for people to have a go at putting out their own content, and I did. And I didn't look back from that day. So that's how my channel began, talking about Kylie Rodney. A lot of stuff in the background, eventually to the point where I started creating my own videos. And for a lot of time, the main focus of my channel was Kylie Rodney. Now, over the last couple of months, I've moved away from covering Kylie Rodney's case. There is a perception on YouTube that people who cover Kylie's case are fruitcakes, that we're seeing conspiracies where there's no conspiracies. There is, it's on a smaller scale than the Delphi case, really. There is this notion being put out there that people who are still covering Kylie's case and saying that she did not drive herself into the reservoir are just kooks, and they can't accept the fact that it was all Kylie's doing. There is so much evidence that shows that Kylie did not drive herself into that reservoir. There's also a lot of evidence which would suggest that her car did not go into the reservoir on the night of this supposed party. And I've spent a lot of time covering all that. So why did I stop covering it? I haven't stopped completely, and I will be coming back and doing more videos on Kylie's case. But I found that, first of all, what was starting to happen was that there were some creators who were not doing due diligence. One creator who was just making up her own stories, basically, and coming out with the most ridiculous content and making everybody else who covers Kylie's case look like a bunch of clowns anyway, because it just, you know, we were the kids in the corner that nobody wanted to talk to because we were covering a case that supposedly should be closed. And it was because of the ridiculous things that some people had been putting out. There were other creators who were coming up with stories which should get them sued by Kylie's family. And I'm surprised that hasn't happened. Making allegations that are not proven. And then you have creators who are supposedly being contacted by people behind the scenes who have first-hand knowledge to do with Kylie's case. Somehow they are close friends of Kylie, or a deathbed confession, or some ridiculous thing like that. And all these things sound the same, and they're not verified, and yet these people are putting out videos about these things. So I basically reached a point where I felt it was time to take a break. And also, with all the documents and the images coming out from the FBI, I think at the time that they all came out, I was really struggling to get hold of them. It's really hard to do FOIA requests from Australia. Some places simply block your email address because it's from outside of the United States. Some places you can't even get to the point of getting onto the web page for the organisation because that particular web page, like a government web page, doesn't allow traffic from outside of the United States. So it's always a nightmare getting hold of FOIA information. And my initial requests for documents and images were met by silence. The only response I saw was one creator putting images out not very long after I had made that request and slapping her watermark all over them so that no one else could use them anyway. Thankfully, someone put me on to Jules of All Trades, and she actually provided me with everything I need. And I actually haven't sat down and looked through all that. So I do want to look through all that. And there were definitely some things from it that came out there were some things which, to me, debunked some of the solid theories that have been held for the last couple of years. And I think a few people are going to be disappointed when they hear that. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that supports a lot of the theories that have been made. And overall, when you look at the documents and the images that came out, when you look at it logically, it definitely supports the notion that Kylie Rodney did not drive herself into the reservoir that night. Now, we know that the FBI case is not closed in terms of Kylie Rodney, but there is this incredible silence that's going on. Now, I saw an interesting post this week, and I do want to address that. And I am going to name up the creator, because I think, to me, it concerns me when people put out things that to me don't sound credible. Now, I saw a post earlier this week from CNY claiming that FBI have told her they are going to provide her with documents, but that she's only allowed access to those documents for 48 hours. And then she's going to report to people on those. Now, seriously, we're talking about the FBI. If they are going to release documents, they are going to release documents, full stop, period. If documents are somehow sensitive documents, they're not going to just release them for 48 hours and say, that's it, you've seen them, you're not allowed to look at them anymore. Because, hello, digital media, you can take screenshots of them. You can copy and paste the entire text into a Word document. You're not going to be limited to 48 hours. Once you've got it, it's out there permanently. And of course the FBI are going to know that. So straight away, I looked at that and I went, this is a joke. Unless you can come out with receipts, then I don't want to know about it. Because either someone is taking her for a ride again, or she's herself is taking us all for a ride. Maybe she got enough views from her deathbed confessions and stuff that she thinks that this is how to get the views, come up with ideas like this. So, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if someone's taking her for a ride, claiming that they're FBI and they're going to give her documents for 48 hours, or if she's trying to take us for a ride herself. But simple logic would say that FBI would never just release documents for 48 hours and say, that's it, no more, you can't have them anymore. If I were in the United States, I would actually be ringing up the FBI to make a query regarding that. And I would be interested, if anybody did actually do that, to find out what they discover from that. I'm pretty certain that we know what the answer would be. So that's about all I've got to say right now about Kylie's case. Like I said, I haven't actually looked at it for well over a month. I needed a break. There's just so much drama over it, so much misinformation, and some ridiculous content creators who basically are making everyone else who covers the case look like a bunch of clowns as well. So I felt that my time could be better spent elsewhere. Like I said, I've not finished with Kylie's case. But when I cover it, I'm going to be covering it with solid, factual information, no speculation, just whatever I feel is important to share with people. I probably will not be going back to super regular content in terms of Kylie's case, because at the end of the day, I've done over a year of putting out pretty much daily videos relating to Kylie's case. So I've just about covered it from every angle in terms of verifiable information. There's a lot of things I haven't touched because to me they are not verifiable. And I know some people have gotten upset with me for not covering particular things. The Salisha Singh stuff, I know one creator is adamant that they know that she's real, they've proven she's real. I'm yet to see anything that totally convinces me that she was a real individual. Anyone can create an account, and when you're done with that account, anyone can delete that account. There is nothing to show that she existed. And interestingly enough, the person who is pushing the whole Salisha thing has also put out a lot of these letters from people close to the case. And you think, well, how do we know that you didn't invent Salisha yourself just to create content? And we know people do that sort of thing. You had that Joseph Morris guy who created a few videos to make it look like Brian Laundrie was out walking a trail and had accidentally posted a video. And then in the Kylie Rodney case, he came out and claimed that there was someone selling Kylie's necklace on some online site. And then he did something else with the Brian Koberger case. I don't know if he's still around. He never comes up in my feed, but I know his channel did get removed at one point in time because he was consistently making up content for cases just to get clicks. So how am I to know that this is not the origins of this Salisha person? So I'm going to move on and talk about Maddie. If you've been following my content, then you will have seen that I've looked quite a lot at Stefan Stearns' parents. And it seems that not a lot of people do look at them, which I find interesting. I think part of that is because of the video that came out from Hidden True Crime, which was the interview back in September, and them talking about how they felt they were being victimised by YouTubers, and that they accepted that their son was a monster. They accepted that it was his responsibility. But, I get that probably from watching that video, a lot of people felt bad about talking about them and decided not to cover them. And I, at first, was one of these people. But then when I went back and started listening back over the things that they'd said, I realised that there were a heck of a lot of inconsistencies. And I thought, well, we've got this July interview that he did, Chris Stearns did, where he actually went into the police department off his own bat. And to me it sounded like he was fishing for information. He wanted to know where Jen was. He wanted to find out if she was in the loony bin, basically. He wanted to find out if they were going to put charges against Jen. And he wanted to try and convince them that Jen was just as culpable. And they kind of sat him on his bum a bit when they said, well, actually, we had her phone, we've gone through it line for line, and no, she was not involved. Now, that doesn't mean that she wasn't protecting Stefan or that she didn't actually have some knowledge of what was going on, and I think many of us believe that she had to have known something was going on. You've got the crazy Woody Allen comments, you've got the comments about I don't trust men, the comments about when she was going to spend time with Tyler and Maddie was concerned about someone Jen was concerned about someone filming Maddie under the bathroom door in the plane or something. You've got people saying that they had discussed the issue with Jen. So we know that Jen had people say to her, we're concerned about this setup that you guys have got. Logically, you'd think that she had to have had some knowledge of what was going on. And I can't help but think that this is someone who desperately needed Stefan in her life. I think she's a dependent personality type. And I think even though her relationship with him was down the gurgler, and apparently she had no sex drive because of her drugs, I think she was happy to serve up her daughter to him because it meant that he stayed around with her. Now, I know a lot of people disagree with that, but to me it definitely seems like that would be the case. I also suspect that she may have known a lot more and was protecting Stefan right up until basically when he was charged with her daughter's murder. I mean, she talks about the images, you know, so she's like, oh, well, I believe about the images, but I don't believe that he would do anything evil. Well, what he was doing was pretty damn evil. So, and she was so ready to accept that, and she didn't show that much emotion. Had you told me in an interview that someone had been doing those things to my child and you showed me photographic evidence, now I think that occurred, did it occur in the car? I'm not sure. But honestly, I think most mothers, their response would be, where is the monster? Let me at him. I'm going to kill him. But no, none of that from her. She did not respond the way you would expect. But anyway, going back to Deb and Chris Stearns, I believe these are people who have enabled their son his entire life. They've covered up for his screw-ups his entire life. We have the story of them stepping in and fixing up a problem where he'd been violent with someone or lost his temper with someone or something. And we have them basically moving him home and controlling his life. And you're going to tell me that when Maddie went missing and his phone was taken, that they wouldn't have tried to help him? I've done a lot of videos which to me show them in a not so flattering light. But my take on it is this. I believe that up until the point where he was arrested because of the images and videos that he had, that they believed that they were helping him over something far less serious. I think he fed them some kind of BS story And because that's what they do, they've stepped in to protect him and help him out, not realising exactly what had happened and just how much serious legal trouble their son was in. And I think since then, they've been trying very hard to protect their own asses, to make sure that people don't realise that until they had realised the extent of what he had done, that they had been trying to protect him. I've done a video talking about Chris's trip to Orlando and how it doesn't make sense for him to have driven there in the middle of the night because they didn't need him to pay for the hotel. What was he there for? He even says that himself at one point. What was he there for? Because he admits to law enforcement that Jen and Stefan paid for their own hotel. They paid for the dog and he reimbursed them. I believe that he was either there as an alibi to be like, well, I was here and Stefan was here, or he was there to provide Stefan with perhaps a door key. We know from FBI files that Stefan was actually logged on to Google at the Stearns' residence down at Northport for over half an hour, until shortly before he was caught on camera again less than a mile from their house. So we know he accessed the house. We know he was inside the house, and we know that he removed a hard drive, which is gone. It's vanished. We don't know where it is. And to me, it seems that, for starters, his parents must know that he did that. And yet their narrative still essentially denies that as being a possibility. They even go so far as to say he couldn't possibly have gotten into the house. But evidence proves otherwise. And let's talk about the time that he was there. Now, sounds like we can roughly calculate about 5 minutes from the house to where the car was caught on camera. That means that he was at that house until quite possibly 7:40 in the morning. We have, according to Chris Stearns, Deb Stearns being an insomniac. She doesn't sleep. He was there in the house from 6:30 in the morning till almost 7:45. And you're telling me she didn't know? She had to have known he was in the house. Her reaction to the suggestion of him being in the house doesn't make sense, because at the time that was actually broached with her, he wasn't in any legal trouble. So why would she have a freak out over the thought of him possibly entering the house, when at that point in time he wasn't thought of as being a person who gets images of children or a person who unalives a child? He was still just at that point her son, who might have been in trouble for something because the police were looking at him because he was the last person to see Maddie, but he was still her son who lived at that house with them, and probably in her eyes he was innocent of all that stuff. So why would she have a freak out over the possibility of him entering the house? It doesn't make sense. I strongly recommend watching the videos that I've done on Chris and Deb Stearns. I know some of them are quite lengthy, but I think they thoroughly explain what I'm talking about here. And when you do see the inconsistencies and things like that, it will make you question what was going on there. So currently, I'm working on a video looking at Jen, and in particular relating to Jen and Maddie's phone, because I think that the evidence from Maddie's phone could point to the fact that Jen was helping cover up for Stefan. It's not something that I feel as confident about in terms of a lot of the other things I've looked at, but it certainly raises questions for me. So that may be out later today, maybe out tomorrow. Kind of halfway through that, I needed a break from working on it, and I thought, well, while I take a break, I might as well just talk things out, do a drive and talk video, because, like I said, it's been a while, and I know there are some people who look forward to these. Some people enjoy just checking out what Australian roads look like. Some people freak out because I drive on the left-hand side of the road. And I will apologise too. It seems that my camera is probably heading towards the end of its days. I am putting aside every spare bit of cash towards replacing my iPhone with a newer model. Just bear with me, it's probably going to be the new year before I can afford to do so. In which case, by that stage, there should be better camera, etc. But hopefully you enjoy the video coverage. I know some of it's a bit wobbly, but this is regional Victoria, so you do get some rough roads, so I have no control over that. That said, I use a dash recorder or a dash cam app on my phone, just because it allows me to get far more content than what I would imagine most dash cams would offer. And of course it is saved directly to my phone. I imagine that it would be quite costly to get a dash cam that's going to have like an SD card and record like, an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of footage. Whereas if I'm doing it on my phone, it does. Hence the reason it's probably not the best quality video. Like I said, hopefully that will all change within the next month or so. So, I think I've talked myself through just about everything. I've covered Kylie, I've covered Delphi, Maddie, Madalena Kochkari, Kristen Smart. Those are the main things I wanted to talk about. I definitely recommend checking out my content on Chris and Deb Stearns, because I think it's quite an eye-opener. You just have to bear with me because some of those videos are kind of long. So, if you're still here, you're still listening, thanks for sticking around and listening. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on any of the things I've discussed in this video. So, thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.
myself,